Financial therapy is gaining traction. But for our listeners who's never heard of it, in simple terms, if you would please clarify how financial therapy is different from traditional financial planning or just general therapy in general.
Okay. Yeah, financial therapy really recognizes first and foremost that we have a relationship with money. And
Mm-hmm.
that may be kind of a foreign concept, but I think when you think about we talk about having a relationship with food or maybe a relationship with exercise or obviously a relationship with another person or our family. Well, what's a relationship made of? It's our thoughts, feelings, and actions
Yeah,
with that other entity. And so financial therapy in its simplest terms is looking at ways to improve your thoughts, feelings, and actions around money.
incredible. Now, I want to get personal. For you, who taught you about money?
Boy, yeah, my parents were they taught me a fair amount. The first thing they taught me was you always have a job.
Oh,
If you want money, go get a job. But they just didn't have the money to hand out. So I had a paper route when I was 10 years old. So they taught me that. They taught me something about budgeting,
hmm.
and somehow that kind of got into me where I've always been interested in financial stuff. Even when I was studying to be a social worker, I was kind of focused on some of the management aspects of that. How do you run an agency? How do you budget for services? All those sorts of things as well.
Now, I know that, the pillars of money are stacked, right? So the basic concepts, which essentially your parents were trying to teach you by encouraging you to get a job, is income. You need money. That's a whole nother conversation. You also mentioned in your work that the issue isn't about a lack of money. People have figured out how to get money, but can you elaborate on the underlying role money plays in people's emotional and mental well-being? And what other skill do you find that most people are missing? I know that's a lot.
Sure. Well, I think that the one thing that we need to recognize is that we all have a money story. Just like you asked me, what did I learn from my parents? Whether we recognize it or not, we've all learned from our parents about money. There's always money is just it's a constant in our lives. So we're always picking up different things. How did my parents fight a lot about money? Did we just not talk about money? How was that viewed? What I found that I think is really interesting is that sometimes those money stories originate with grandparents, particularly in my generation, and maybe some people somewhat younger than me. Their parents grew up in households where the depression was a very real thing,
Mhm.
and got very you always save. We're not sure if you can trust banks. You need to be prepared tomorrow. Everything could collapse. So people are, living in a real scarcity mindset that come out of that kind of message as a kid. So, kind of back to your question about, yeah, I see lots of people that they have sufficient wealth, but you see a couple of different things. One is scarcity. They never feel like they have enough. A second condition you can see is kind of shame that they have maybe too much. That maybe they grew up in a household where rich people are, they're always looking down on us, and money is kind of the root of all evil, those sort of things, and they're carrying those sort of messages. So you really have to look at not just how much money you have, but how do you look at that money? What's the context of that for you as an individual? It's back to, what are my thoughts, feelings, and actions around money, and kind of slicing and dicing that so you have a better understanding.
Definitely. It's something that's so important, but yet we are so passive with our belief systems. But like you said, we're always being influenced. We're always strengthening that belief system, whether it's from the foundational messages that we got from our family, or whether you saw them struggle or you were denied every time that, prom came or something, you were taught that not to prioritize those things. You pick up those messages and essentially carry them with you into adulthood. Now, I do want to talk about the unique perspective that you have, having both therapy skills and a deep understanding of business and personal finance. How does that dual expertise benefit your clients when they're grappling with financial decisions like managing savings or even mortgages?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. What I think I bring to the table with my experience is kind of experience. I mean, I'm going to be 74 in a couple of weeks. And I think that I've learned a few things along the way. I'd like to feel like I have a little bit of wisdom, nothing, it's not overflowing. But I think the thing I bring to the table for my clients is that the things that they're struggling with, I've pretty much been there. And while I'm not there to give them the answers, I can certainly have empathy and some understanding of that. And I have a really good knowledge of the kind of the structural side of it. I've dealt with parents with Alzheimer's. I've dealt with the whole nursing homes scenario. I've dealt with how to save for retirement. I've dealt with adult kids that have needed a little extra boost every once in a while. I've dealt with chronic illness. I've dealt with chronic pain. I've dealt with success. I have had an enormous amount of good luck in my life, and I don't take that for granted in any way. So I don't look at what I've been able to accomplish as something like, well, here's the formula, just go out and do your thing and everything will be fine. I think it's way more complicated than that, but I just feel like experience counts.
Absolutely. Now, speaking about that experience, you shared that you've turned over your own investment management due to an emotional involvement. This is a very relatable point to many of us. What are some common emotional drivers that can lead to poor financial decisions, and what are some strategies for becoming more aware of these influences?
Well, that is a very pertinent question today, right? Because we have a whole lot of people out there that now that we're into the world of you manage your own retirement savings, right? You're not getting a pension, excuse me, you manage your savings. And so we have a whole population that has acquired, on paper, some pretty significant wealth to finance retirement. And at the same time, they are living in this environment, particularly today, of extreme volatility, right? Stock market's down 20. What do I do? Should I sell everything? So to get to your question, my solution with that was this dates back to like 2010 for me. So this is after the 2008 financial crash. And I had a number of different IRAs that I felt like I needed to kind of get serious about these pieces. And I looked at all of this and I recognized that my emotional involvement with those kinds of decisions, the stock market's down today. Should I be selling something? Am I making the biggest mistake of my life? Am I going to be in poverty when I'm in my retirement? All of those kinds of decisions. I just read this article said, here's a great new stock, or I should be buying crypto. Here's all of these things that are coming at you all the time around financial management. And I think that you really need to make an honest decision with yourself if you have the capability, if you can handle all of the emotional whirlwinds that come along with that. For me, I just decided, I'm going to be a lot happier if I turn this over to someone else. Do I think that I have chosen the person who is going to make my fortune for me? Never going to happen. Whoever I have chosen for that job, there's probably going to be some times when they're doing pretty good, and maybe some times when I wish they would have done better than they did. But I am going to have a more satisfying, calm life if I take a step back from all of that. And that's worked for me. And I deal with people almost every day where I see exactly the opposite, where they are so involved with their, these long-term decisions and all the information that they're getting from every direction. Like, now's a great time to buy stocks. You should be selling everything. You can find any message that you want is out there. And if you look hard enough, it's going to find you. And so to me, there are some people where managing their portfolios is, they're fully capable of that. But I think for the typical person, it's not a great idea. And I'm not a financial planner, so I'm not advertising for me. I'm just saying this is heavy stuff, and there are different ways to look at it. What I can do is I'm sort of like, I can help you if you're struggling with making that decision. I can help you to look at what makes sense for you. And I know a lot of financial planners, so I can refer you on to some people to talk to. But I do think that particularly for people that are getting closer to retirement, this becomes a bigger and bigger and more emotionally laden question. And so I want to help them find a path through that.
Absolutely. Now, you kind of hinted, the difference between a financial planner and a financial therapist, right? Can you walk me through what a session would be like if someone wanted to approach, let's say myself, I'm sure I need some financial therapy. I've been in
Okay.
and oftentimes finances come up, but it seems like this is a completely different thing. And no matter how equipped the therapist is, having these specific skills that you mentioned, I'm just intrigued. How would that?
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. So as a financial therapist with a mental health background, let's start out there. How is that going to be different? It is, you know, because of the who we are, the people that are showing up at our door are people that recognize that money is an issue for them. So, and I would just say that I think that one of the big differences there is that I feel like money has been kind of a taboo subject in regular therapy. So we're sort of throwing the doors open. Hey, this is not only is it okay to talk about money, but we are specifically equipped to help you both from the sort of, and this is kind of to a greater or lesser degree, depending on the therapist, we understand some of this money stuff, but we also understand and have training in these pieces like what is your money story? What are the typical kinds of defense mechanisms and tools that emerge with people coming out of different environments? How do we start to take that apart for you and help you to understand? I mean, particularly if you see like dysfunctional behavior, like, a typical kind of problem that a financial therapist might see is I overspend. I can't seem to save. I think I make enough money, but I'm always overspending. And I just get more and more frustrated with that. So sitting down and talking about, okay, what's happening to you emotionally when you are making those spending decisions? Do you get that endorphin rush from sitting there? You need it every day to get onto Amazon and have some package show up at your door. Let's talk about that. And I think there you start to see the crossover with traditional therapy. If you're talking about something that looks like addictive behavior, then that's very much in part of a traditional therapy approach. If you think about something, I can't spend any money because I'm so anxious. I'm anxious that the world's going to end tomorrow and I'm going to need every penny. If you see somebody who's got generalized anxiety around money, again, we are an overlay to those other pieces. It's not that we're a kind of a silo where everything is very specific to financial therapy. It's sort of a starting point. And quite honestly, a lot of, almost always really, when you start talking about the financial issues, you start to get into other issues as well. This is the message I got from my parents. Well, there's probably a bigger message behind that, and we need to unpack some of that along the way.
Absolutely. I agree. Now, you've been retired for 25 years, right?
No, I've been retired only since 2017. I've been retired for like 8 years.
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood that. What for someone who's in like the middle of their career, what sort of decisions should they start thinking about so that they can have a successful retirement?
Well, for me, I was starting a plan, okay, that I think the thing to realize, and I've worked with really a surprising number of people around this, is really getting your arms around this whole idea of the time value of money, that even if it seems like a small amount, if you start saving it now and investing now, so you're investing for the next 20 years, having a plan that starts to show you how that money is going to grow can be very powerful. So I think part of that, and this is in contrast to where exactly am I putting my money. This is more, I am saving my money, and let's just say I'm just putting it into a very broad-based kind of fund that's going to try and mimic the overall stock market. And we can see the historical growth of the stock market, and we basically live with the idea that growth, even though there's a lot of volatility, that growth trend is going to continue in a similar direction. There'll be highs and lows, but it'll be in a similar direction. So starting to have a plan and being able to see the long-term effects of that plan, like I said, can be very, very powerful. Looking at how you're spending and trying to set some goals. I think a very good metric would be to say, I want to save 15% of my salary towards retirement. Now that can be, if you're getting a match from your employer, different ways to put that together, but looking at a target like that and then looking at the impact of that over the next 20 years and where that's going to put you, I think is an important exercise. Other pieces along the way as well. If you have kids, and this is really, this is ultra challenging. I completely acknowledge this. You have kids, you want to send them to college. How do we save for college? What's our plan there? Do we own a home? Are we paying a mortgage? Are we growing some wealth in that area? Just looking at all of these different pieces. For me, what I started to do about 20 years ago, I had my own little spreadsheet and I just started keeping track of all of my assets, and I would look at them once a quarter. So 4 times a year, I would look at them. I wasn't looking at them like every day or anything. I was just, 4 times a year, I was just sitting down, and there was something an emotional piece of that I saw them growing, but there was times when they weren't growing. But even then, I felt like I had more control. I had a picture. I think people really suffer from the unknown of like, I don't want to talk about this stuff. I want to keep it at arm's length. And that creates a lot of anxiety.
Yes, absolutely. And then also there's the struggle of people that are like, I don't even earn enough to pay attention to it. What do you say?
Yeah. Well, I think the unfortunate part of us as financial therapists, we can't charge insurance. It's all private pay. So our clients tend to have enough money to afford that. I want to, is it okay if I throw in a plug for another organization?
Yeah, please.
Sure. Certified as a financial social worker. And there's an organization called the Center for Financial Social Work, where they have social workers that are really, really much more focused on just those kinds of issues of like, I don't feel like I have enough money. I really need some help in budgeting and trying to figure out, even though I know, I've got limited income, how can I kind of maximize that for me? So there are other places. There's the accredited financial counselors too also work in that arena as well. And both of those organizations have, they have directories on their websites, and I can give you the links for those. But they have directories on their websites of their counselors that really can address a lot of those issues.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, please, if you share that, I'll include it in the show notes. So for any listeners that want to head there, they can. I want to commend you for a second. I do want to say congratulations on reinventing yourself at 71. I'm definitely going to send this episode to my dad because I found it inspiring. You already had a successful career. You retired out of that and then chose to come back in and pour all of your wisdom back into others. So I really do commend you. And talking to you, I see your heart and the desire that you have to like make a difference. What advice would you have for someone who's also interested in following a similar path, maybe not the same industry, but who's interested in kind of finding themselves and getting back out there? And also if you can touch a little bit about the ageism that they may face and that you've kind of alluded to before.
Well, I think that it's important around the whole retirement question that you understand your values, because I do think and this is certainly true of me, when we're working, our values tend to get really wrapped up in not only who we are, but in the, we're working for this company and I'm going to be a great sales guy, and here I've got these goals I'm trying to do. I'm working on all these kind of external things. And I think when you get to the retirement question, you really need to take a step back and say, what are my values and what's important to me? And I don't think that is a easy question necessarily to answer. What I started doing a couple of years before I retired was I just had an app on my phone, just a text app, and I started making a list that was called Stuff I Want to Do When I Retire. And I saw something I thought was a cool thing to do. Like, I want to take more walks in this park. And I would just write that down. And I had a list of like 50 things when I retired. And it wasn't like it was a roadmap, but it really got me in touch with what are here's the freedom that I have. What are the things that I can do? I think when you start to look at that and then start thinking about your own values. And I do think that we suffer from this cultural structure. You retire when you're 60 or 65 or whatever. But our health has gotten so much better. I mean, I'm in my 70s. I don't plan on slowing down. So I think that looking at it as, okay, and if you're lucky, all right, okay, I've had this job. I've got these savings. Maybe, hopefully I've got a pension. I'm eligible for Social Security. I've got the financial structure to step away from having to worry about, to connect work with how I have a roof over my head. And now I can connect work with what do I really want to do. And I think that a part of that I really appreciate is I dial this in, right? I don't want to work full time. I don't want to work 40 hours a week. I mean, right now I spend a lot of time between my board work and other nonprofit work and seeing clients that I'm pretty busy. But the last thing I want is, man, I got the man's waiting for me at 8 a.m. I better be there. I wanted freedom from that. And I think that that's important, that you can build your own structure. But I think that when you start to build a structure that says, this is really going to give me this work that I'm doing is going to give meaning to my life, I think that we're very fortunate to be able to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's so much that I want to go into about that because, like, aligning your purpose with your work, sometimes it works out, sometimes it is very much a luxury, but I know we have a few more minutes. Wait, you want to touch on that really quick?
Sure. Yeah, as I was saying, I think that we have these economic requirements that drag us in different directions. And that was absolutely true for me. I got to the point where I was like, what the heck am I doing here? This, I mean, I love the paycheck, but this work has so little meaning for me. But, I'm going to keep doing it. So, but I think for me, the one piece of, I guess, advice, wisdom, whatever you want to call it, is to both be open to new ideas. Didn't know anything about financial therapy. And when I read about it, it's like, whoa, this is really ringing the bells for me, to be open to that and then to have some confidence. I mean, it took me about 6 months until I made a decision. I had joined the Financial Therapy Association. I was kind of like an observer, right? I was like, oh, this will be fun. I'll meet some people. I'll learn some stuff. And then I realized, oh, I could go through this. I could become a certified financial therapist. That took me, kind of really close to a year because I had to go through I had to do a lot of studying. I had to take a couple of different exams. I had to go back through a licensing process for my social work license. So there were a bunch of pieces to that, but I was able to see a goal. Here's where I want to be. And I had the confidence that I could keep with it. And so I'm really proud and humbled that I've been able to do what I have been able to do at this point.
Incredible. Now, I have 2 more questions and I'm going to let you go. We have about 6 minutes or so. So you mentioned that you have a kid, you have a son, right?
No, I have 2 daughters.
2 daughters. Where did I get that from? You have kids. Okay. What's the one principle that you would instill also considering a pattern that you're seeing amongst your clients? What's the one value that you would say everyone should consider strengthening or to ensure that they have about finances?
The one thing they should strengthen is I basically already said it, is planning, is have a plan.
Okay.
Really have a plan. I've had mixed results with my 2 kids on this, which I'm a little embarrassed.
Everyone has their path. You can do your best, you can guide and offer, but God, I don't know your spiritual belief, has His plan for everyone.
I'm very proud of both of my kids. My one daughter works in nonprofit and my other daughter is a 3rd grade teacher. They both have really given of themselves, and I've kind of got them focused on some saving and retirement planning, but I wish they'd be a little more focused sometimes, but it's okay.
That's okay. They'll figure it out, but I'm sure they're extremely grateful whether they realize it now or not. that you have, introduced them to this, because no one talked to me about money, I'm just having to figure it out. But yeah, I'm sure they're extremely grateful, and they are, in fact, very blessed. So if you want to leave any lasting words, and then also share, how they can connect with you, book a session, etc.
Sure. Yeah, I guess lasting words. I am very passionate about the financial therapy as a service. I am very willing to help people. If you're interested in seeing a financial therapist, I'm just willing to talk to people about financial therapy if they want to learn more about it and help you. Not doesn't have to be me. I'm happy to refer you to other people that might be a better fit, or if you want to talk to some different people, really happy to do that as well. I think I am the best fit for people, and I see, mostly just works out this way. I see mostly men. I see a lot of men in their 40s, 50s, and 60s that are all getting into that. Hey, I've got a couple kids, and I know I'm going to retire someday, or retirement's just around the corner, and I hadn't really given as much thought as I need to. I think I can bring a lot to that. I also work with couples. We haven't talked about that at all, which is a whole other discussion, but I like working with couples. Money is a huge topic, as I think anybody that's in a couple will pretty much admit. So I help people. Yeah, I am really honored when I can help couples to try and sort through that. It's definitely hard work, harder work for them than it is for me, but it can be some pretty rough going. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Incredible. All right, John, I appreciate you so much. It's been such a pleasure meeting you and connecting. I'm going to replay this, for myself over and over, and I definitely look forward to further connecting.
Okay. Well, Naomi, thanks very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Of course. Thank you.
Okay. You too.